And did they take all your possessions away?
Yes, including my jewelry, except my baby's ring. They let me keep her ring, which was very nice.
Did you sleep well?
Michelle Phillips and Mama Cass shared one of the most complicated relationships in music history. Bandmates, best friends, and at times, rivals caught in the middle of the same love triangle. But after Cass died, Michelle became the one person who could finally answer a question that had followed Cass's daughter her entire life. For years, no one knew who her real father was, not even Owen herself. What Michelle eventually uncovered would close a chapter Cass never got the chance to close herself. The humiliation before Mama Cass. Ellen Naomi Cohen, better known to the world as Mama Cass, was born in Baltimore in September 1941. Her family came from Russian Jewish immigrant roots, and money was tight during her childhood. Her father eventually found a way to make a living, opening a lunch wagon or, according to some accounts, an ice cream shop. Either way, Cass grew up knowing what it meant to struggle. But even as a kid, there was something about her that stood out. Cass had a huge personality, a powerful presence, and a natural talent that was impossible to ignore. At the same time, she was dealing with something that would follow her for most of her life: her weight. Cass struggled with her size from a very young age, and with it came a painful sense that she was different from everyone else. She once described herself as having been fat since the age of 7 and explained that being fat made a person feel separated from the crowd. Eventually, though, Cass found a place where being different could actually become an advantage. In high school, she discovered theater and live performance. For the first time, she had found something that seemed to fit her larger-than-life personality. She even created the stage name Cass Elliot, taking Cass from actress Peggy Cass and Elliot from the name of a friend who had died. It was more than just a new name, it was the beginning of a new identity, and Cass was ready to chase it. Believing acting was where her future lay, she made a huge gamble. She dropped out of high school, packed her bags, and headed to New York City with dreams of becoming an actress. But Broadway was not nearly as welcoming as she had hoped. At one point, Cass lost an important role to a young, unknown performer named Barbra Streisand. It was another painful reminder that talent alone was not always enough to get through the door. So Cass changed direction. If acting was not going to work, maybe music would. At first, the music business actually seemed promising. Between 1962 and 1964, Cass became involved with 2 different groups, first the Big Three and later the Mugwumps. The Mugwumps would change her life for another reason. That was where she met Denny Doherty. Cass fell hard for Denny, and for a woman who had spent years feeling like she was on the outside looking in, this relationship quickly became much more than a simple crush. But Cass's love life was already complicated. In 1963, she married Mugwumps guitarist James Hendricks. There was no real romance behind the marriage. It was reportedly a sham arrangement designed to help Hendricks avoid the military draft, and the two never consummated the relationship. Cass's heart was still somewhere else. After roughly 8 months, the Mugwumps broke apart, leaving Cass on her own and hoping Denny might follow her. He didn't. Instead, Denny joined the New Journeymen, a folk group fronted by married couple John and Michelle Phillips. Cass was devastated, but she wasn't ready to let Denny disappear from her life. She also knew something else. The New Journeymen needed a voice like hers. Denny had rejected Cass romantically, partly because of her weight, but he couldn't deny how talented she was. He believed her powerful voice could give the group something it was missing. John Phillips wasn't convinced. Officially, Phillips claimed Cass's voice was too deep for the arrangements he had created. But there was a much uglier side to his resistance. Phillips was deeply critical of Cass's appearance and reportedly believed she was simply too heavy to fit the image he wanted for the group. For Cass, that rejection hit especially hard. Her entire life had been shaped by society's obsession with what a woman was supposed to look like. Hollywood was filled with slim, glamorous stars such as Audrey Hepburn, and Cass understood exactly where she stood in that world. In some of her own writings, she even acknowledged that she sometimes used her weight as a kind of protection. If she convinced herself that she could never compete with other women, then she didn't have to risk being rejected by trying. Unfortunately, other women were more than willing to compete with her. Cass desperately wanted into the New Journeymen, partly because she wanted to be near Denny. Michelle Phillips later recalled that Cass seemed to follow the group wherever they went. but the treatment she received was humiliating. She was ordered around, sent to fetch drinks, and teased constantly. They would sometimes allow her to rehearse with them, only to leave her out when it was time to perform. Cass kept coming back anyway, and then, suddenly, everything changed. The diet that nearly destroyed Cass. The new journeyman had developed a serious habit of spending more time partying than worrying about their finances. Eventually, they burned through their money and found themselves with nowhere to go, so they turned to the one person they knew might actually help them, Cass. The group arrived at her Los Angeles home, and Cass recognized the opportunity immediately. According to later accounts, she gave them a choice. John Phillips could continue objecting to her appearance, but if he wanted the group to have somewhere to stay, he needed to let her become part of it. There was another, far more dramatic version of how Cass supposedly earned her place. For years, the band allowed a strange legend to grow around the story. According to that version, Cass had traveled with the new journeyman to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. While walking past a construction site, a heavy pipe supposedly fell and struck her on the head. The story claimed that the accident somehow changed her voice, giving her the higher range John Phillips had supposedly been waiting for. Cass herself later repeated the story, saying the concussion left her with headaches for weeks before she suddenly noticed that she could sing higher. It made for a great story, but it almost certainly wasn't the truth. Years later, people close to the group suggested that the pipe story was essentially a cover for the real reason Cass had been kept out. John Phillips did not want the public to know that her weight and appearance had played such a major role in his decision. Michelle Phillips later said she never noticed any meaningful change in Cass's voice after the accident. Whatever really happened, Cass was finally in. The new journeyman soon transformed into the Mamas and the Papas, and their lives changed almost overnight. With Cass's enormous voice helping drive the group's sound, they produced some of the biggest songs of the era, including California Dreamin' and Monday Monday. Cass had finally made it, but getting into the band didn't mean the cruelty stopped. If anything, it became part of the group's culture. John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, and Denny Doherty frequently joked about Cass's weight. Teasing even made its way into the band's music. In Creek Alley, they included a line about nobody getting fat except Mama Cass. The joke became so recognizable that the nickname Mama Cass followed her for the rest of her career. And behind the laughter was something much more painful. Cass had joined the group partly because she desperately wanted to be close to Denny Doherty. But Denny wasn't in love with her. He was interested in Michelle Phillips. For Cass, that was devastating. The woman she already compared herself against was now involved with the one man she desperately wanted. Eventually, Denny admitted to Cass that he and Michelle were having an affair. Cass was heartbroken and furious. She reportedly confronted Michelle and struggled to understand why she would choose Denny, when, in Cass's eyes, Michelle could have had practically anyone. Still, Cass couldn't let Denny go. Even after learning about the affair, she continued hoping that he might eventually return her feelings. Years later, Denny revealed just how far Cass's desperation had gone. According to him, Cass once proposed to him. His response never came because, by his own account, he was too high to properly respond at the time. But Cass's romantic life didn't end with Denny. She continued to have relationships with a string of men and even joked that finding boyfriends was easy for her because she could simply buy them motorcycles, leather suits, and acting lessons. But there was a much darker explanation for some of those relationships. Denny Bruce, a close friend of Cass and drummer for the Mothers of Invention, later spoke about the men who surrounded her. He suggested that while many of them were attractive and genuinely enjoyed her company, some were more interested in what Cass could provide than in Cass herself. According to Bruce, drugs were a major reason certain men stayed close, and Cass had plenty of them around. Her life with the Mamas and the Papas became a dangerous mixture of fame, partying, drugs, alcohol, relationships, and emotional chaos. One reporter famously summed up the group's lifestyle by pointing out that before they became famous, they took drugs, drank, and partied, and after becoming famous, they simply did the same thing with more money. Eventually, that lifestyle began catching up with Cass. In 1967, she traveled to London ahead of the rest of the group for an upcoming performance. Instead of preparing for the show, she ended up in trouble with the police. Cass was arrested over allegations that she had stolen bed linens from the apartment where she was staying. On the surface, it sounded almost ridiculous, But there was supposedly much more going on. One of Cass's rumored lovers, Pick Dawson, was also believed to be involved in her drug supply. Authorities were reportedly far more interested in Dawson than in a few missing sheets, and the theft allegation may have been used as leverage to put pressure on Cass. Whatever the real motive was, Cass spent an entire night in a London jail cell. The next day, she appeared before a West London magistrate, but the case quickly fell apart. Authorities didn't have enough evidence to continue, and the charges were dropped. The legal trouble was over, but the publicity wasn't. The negative press became so intense that the mamas and the papas were forced to cancel their upcoming performance. Cass, however, wasn't about to let the story follow her forever. When she returned to London, she decided to deal with the rumors in the most Cass Elliot way possible. During a performance at the London Palladium, she finally addressed the infamous bedsheet allegations herself. Instead of looking embarrassed, she turned the entire scandal into a joke. The audience loved it. But behind the humor, Cass was reaching a breaking point. The mamas and the papas had given her fame, but they had also given her heartbreak, humiliation, and a lifestyle that was becoming increasingly dangerous. John Phillips later suggested that Cass's idea of show business was about the actual business of putting on a show, while the rest of the group mainly wanted to have fun. By 1968, the fun was running out. Cass was ready to leave. Her solo success with Dream a Little Dream of Me gave her the confidence to finally step away from the mamas and the papas and try to prove that she could stand on her own. And almost immediately, she got a major opportunity. Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas offered Cass a 3-week residency reportedly worth 6 figures. This was supposed to be her moment. Cass was going to prove she could carry an entire show herself. But there was one problem. The pressure to lose weight had never really disappeared. If anything, it was now worse. Cass wanted to look different when she stepped onto that Las Vegas stage, so she pushed herself into an extreme crash diet. For 7 months, she reportedly fasted 4 days a week. The weight came off rapidly. She eventually lost roughly a third of her reported 300-pound body weight, but her body was paying the price. Instead of arriving in Las Vegas healthier and stronger, Cass's health began falling apart. In the weeks leading up to opening night, she suffered from acute tonsillitis, hemorrhaging vocal cords, mononucleosis, and hepatitis. The woman who had spent years fighting to prove that her size couldn't stop her career was now facing something much more frightening. She had finally reached one of the biggest stages of her life, and just as the spotlight was about to fall on her, her body was beginning to give out. Her biggest comeback became a nightmare. Massive stars like Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, and Mia Farrow all showed up in Las Vegas, eager to see Cass Elliot prove herself as a solo artist. From the outside, it looked like the perfect night for a comeback. Behind the scenes, though, Cass was barely holding herself together. Her health problems had become so severe that she had barely been able to rehearse before opening night. When she finally walked onto the Caesar's Palace stage, the star-studded audience was expecting the powerful voice they knew from the mamas and the papas. Instead, they got a woman who was seriously ill and struggling just to get through the performance. Cass's voice was weak, and she struggled through the set. When it was finally over, she returned to the stage and pleaded with the audience to give her another chance, promising that the first night would be rough, but things would improve. Unfortunately, the second show went even worse. Her contract required 2 performances every night, so after taking a short break, Cass returned to the stage, hoping she could somehow recover. But her voice was even weaker, and this time the audience had little patience. People began walking out while she was still performing. Caesar's Palace had seen enough. The contract was canceled. The next morning, the newspapers went after her with everything they had. Newsweek compared the disastrous debut to the Titanic, describing Cass as a great ocean liner that had set out on its maiden voyage only to sink. The humiliation sent Cass into a deep depression. Yet, while her professional life was falling apart, there was one part of her world that gave her something to hold on to. Shortly before signing the Las Vegas contract, Cass had given birth to a healthy baby girl named Owen. The name reportedly came from Cass's playful explanation that the baby was her own. For all the chaos surrounding Cass's career and relationships, motherhood was something she took extremely seriously. Owen later remembered her mother as completely devoted to her, saying Cass was responsible for every part of her welfare. Cass was also fiercely protective of her daughter. She reportedly became uncomfortable when nannies grew too close to Owen and would sometimes dismiss them. She kept the child's existence largely away from the public because she wanted to protect both her reputation and her daughter's privacy. When the media eventually discovered that Cass had a daughter, she refused to reveal the father's identity. That naturally sent the tabloids into overdrive, with reporters creating one theory after another about who the father could be. But Cass's name was surrounded by other rumors too. Throughout her career, she became famous for throwing lavish Hollywood parties where major celebrities could be found alongside some much darker figures. One of the most disturbing claims was that Charles Manson and members of his group had attended a party at Cass's home. Exactly how close Cass was to Manson remains unclear, but after Manson and his followers committed their horrific murders, the story became a major part of the gossip surrounding her. John Phillips reportedly went so far as to blame Cass for introducing Manson's circle to their wider group of friends, even attempting to connect her to the tragedy involving Sharon Tate. Police did not accept those claims, and there was no evidence that Cass had any involvement in the murders. Meanwhile, Cass's solo career was struggling to gain momentum. After the disaster in Las Vegas, she stayed busy with television appearances, which helped keep her name in the public eye. But Cass wanted more than simply being a familiar face on television. She wanted a successful solo career, and she still wanted something else that had always seemed just out of reach: a stable relationship. Then, in 1971, she met Donald von Wiedenmann, a journalist and heir to a Bavarian barony. The relationship moved quickly, and the two married that same year. Unfortunately, the marriage lasted only about 2 months before falling apart. By 1972, Cass was back to focusing on music. She recorded "The Road Is No Place for a Lady," which became her first major solo release after the Mamas and the Papas finally ended following their 1971 reunion album, People Like Us. Unfortunately, the album failed to make the Billboard 200, leaving Cass once again searching for a new direction. By 1973, she decided it was time for a major change. Cass fired Bobby Dunhill, her former manager from the Mamas and the Papas era, and hired Alan Carr. Carr had a very different vision for her career. Rather than trying to push Cass toward the younger rock, pop, and folk audience that had made her famous, he wanted to turn her into a glamorous, old-school entertainer. The idea actually suited Cass. She had always loved show business in its biggest and most theatrical form. Her biggest solo hit, "Dream a Little Dream of Me," was itself a revival of an older standard, and her version had reached number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1968. So Carr and Cass began building a completely different image. Instead of Mama Cass, the folk rock singer from the Mamas and the Papas, they wanted audiences to see Cass Elliot as a sophisticated cabaret performer who could command a stage with powerful ballads and classic show tunes. In September 1973, Cass released a live album called "Don't Call Me Mama Anymore." The album had been recorded at Mr. Kelly's nightclub in Chicago just weeks earlier and featured songs from Broadway, classic torch numbers, and another performance of "Dream a Little Dream of Me." Unfortunately, the album failed to chart. Cass and Carr then tried to promote it through a television special with the same title. The CBS program was filled with strange comedy sketches and celebrity appearances, including Dick Van Dyke, Joel Grey, Michelle Phillips, and even a trained bear named Bruno. Cass and Van Dyke appeared together as Laurel and Hardy in a scene from Romeo and Juliet, while Cass and Joel Grey performed as Archie and Edith Bunker from All in the Family. It was certainly memorable, but not in the way Cass had hoped. The Los Angeles Times was brutal in its review, calling the special one of the worst hours of television in years, and warning that another failure could seriously damage Cass's television career. Despite the criticism, Cass remained everywhere on television during the 1973 and 1974 seasons. She appeared as an animated version of herself on the new Scooby-Doo movies, joined the panel on Match Game, and made appearances on The Mike Douglas Show, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, and The Merv Griffin Show. She also moved into acting, landing a major role in the 1973 television movie Saga of Sonora, a Western musical in which she played and sang as a character named Mrs. James. But while Cass's career remained busy, her health was becoming increasingly fragile. Her extreme dieting habits continued to take a toll, and by 1974, the warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore. The tragedy nobody saw coming. One of the places Cass appeared most frequently was The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. She appeared on the program more than 20 times throughout her career and even guest hosted on several occasions. 4 of those appearances came between 1973 and 1974. During 2 of those visits, Cass suffered serious health problems. On one occasion, she was leaving the studio when she tripped over an improperly placed sewer grate. She had to be taken to a local hospital to make sure she had not broken any bones. Several weeks later, she returned to the show. This time, things were far more serious. Only about 10 minutes before the cameras were scheduled to roll, Cass collapsed and lost consciousness. She was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. When she made what would become her final appearance on The Tonight Show on May 7, 1974, she explained that she had been suffering from a severe headache and had been unable to eat. Her blood sugar had apparently dropped, causing her to collapse. The incident kept her in the hospital for 4 days and became major news in both the United States and Europe. But instead of slowing down, Cass continued working. Almost immediately after leaving the hospital, she traveled to London and completed a demanding 2-week engagement at the London Palladium. By Saturday, July 27, 1974, Cass was preparing for the final 2 performances of the engagement. Before leaving her dressing room, she wrote a warm message on the mirror for the next performer scheduled to take the stage, Debbie Reynolds. After the show, Cass went out to celebrate. Her first stop was Mick Jagger's 31st birthday party at his home in Chelsea. From there, she attended a brunch held in her honor by actress Georgia Brown. But by then, people were beginning to notice that something was seriously wrong. Cass was coughing constantly, blowing her nose, and visibly struggling to breathe. Still, she continued with her plans. Later that evening, she attended another party hosted by American entertainment journalist Jack Martin. Cass was normally one of the most energetic people in any room, but that night, she looked exhausted and sick. She told people that she simply needed sleep. She had been awake since Mick Jagger's party and was exhausted from the long night. Eventually, she decided to return to her apartment. It would be the last night of her life. Cass returned to Flat 12 at 9 Curzon Place in London's Mayfair, an apartment owned by musician Harry Nilsson. By the following day, she still had not come out of her bedroom. Her secretary, Dot McLeod, became concerned and eventually opened the bedroom door. Cass was lying motionless on the bed. Her road manager, George Caldwell, was called in and confirmed the terrible reality. Cass Elliot was dead at just 32 years old. Almost immediately, another tragedy began unfolding around her death. Sue Cameron, a close friend of Cass and a writer for The Hollywood Reporter, called the apartment to confirm the news. Alan Carr answered the phone and reportedly told her that the public should be informed Cass had died after choking on a ham sandwich because half of one had been found near her bed. That story became one of the most damaging myths surrounding Cass Elliot's death. Before the facts were even established, newspapers around the world began reporting that the overweight singer had choked to death while eating. It was a cruel story that seemed to reinforce the very stereotypes Cass had spent her entire life fighting. Then came an even stranger rumor claiming that Cass had died while giving birth to a secret child fathered by John Lennon. Neither story was true. The official autopsy conducted by Dr. Keith Simpson found that Cass had suffered left-sided heart failure. She had experienced a rapidly developing heart attack, and there was no evidence that she had choked on food. Cass was eventually laid to rest at Mount Sinai Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Her daughter Owen was only 7 years old. For years, Owen had to grow up hearing the false story that her mother had died because she had been eating too much. The rumor became another cruel reminder of how Cass's weight had been used against her throughout her life. For Owen, there was nothing funny about it. It was simply another painful insult directed at her mother after death. Michelle Phillips, exposed. The truth about Mama Cass no one knew. Cass's death devastated Michelle Phillips. The two women had experienced an incredible amount together. They had been bandmates, friends, and at different points, rivals caught in an incredibly complicated love triangle. Yet all that chaos had ultimately brought them closer. Michelle later found some comfort in believing Cass had finally reached a place where she was happy with herself. She had spent years living under the Mama Cass label, but toward the end of her life, she had begun establishing herself as Cass Elliot, a solo performer with her own identity. For Michelle, that mattered. Cass had finally stepped out of the shadow of the mamas and the papas and become the artist she had always wanted to be. After her death, Owen went to live with Cass's younger sister. The identity of her father remained a closely guarded secret, and for years the tabloids guessed at one famous man after another. Eventually, the mystery was solved by someone Owen never expected. Michelle Phillips called Owen and told her that she had found her father. She then sent Owen a plane ticket so she could finally meet him. The secret Cass had taken to her grave was finally revealed. Owen's father was Chuck Day, a talented session guitarist who had worked on some of the Mamas and the Papas' most famous recordings, including Monday, Monday and California Dreamin'. After years of rumors, the truth about Cass Elliot's daughter had finally come to light.